Welcome. Today's webinar is something that I think can, if you listen to what I'm talking about and you understand it, which I think you will, it could literally change the direction of your entire life and your entire career. And I'm going to teach you some information that I've learned from working with some of the most successful attorneys in the world, as well as attorneys, people that haven't succeeded as attorneys, as well as business people and others that have really reached great heights in their career. I hope you pay a lot of attention today, and I really want this to change your life, and I think it can. One thing I wanted to say before we start is this is a live webinar. As usual, I congratulate everybody for showing up. These types of talks and things can really make a difference in your life, and I think that this one will too. This is not a very long webinar, so at the end of the webinar, we'll take questions, and I hope you stay for the whole webinar. Most people always do, but this is a topic that I'm very excited about, and I think can help you quite a bit. Most attorneys out there never reach their goals. I see attorneys every day and resumes, hundreds of resumes that I review every day, and most people never become as successful as they possibly could be practicing law. They often don't understand the rules. They often take the side of people that may be against their firms and not for their firms. Many people never have goals. They just shuttle around between jobs and they just never reach their full potential. And I'm going to tell you right now that if you went to law school and passed the bar, there is no reason that if you commit to this profession and understand the rules I'm going to talk to you about today, that you can't make $1 million or $2 million or $3 million a year. It doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter whatever has happened to you in the past. You can reach really great heights in this profession if you understand and take action of what I'm going to talk about today. So there are really two keys to succeeding in everyone. And one is a little bit more complicated than that, but I'll explain that. The one's easy to understand, the other's a little bit difficult. But regardless of any profession, you're going to need to understand some fairly simple rules in order to succeed and do as well as you possibly can. You need to learn the habits and what the most successful people do. You need to learn how they think, and you need to look at other people that have succeeded at a high level to be like them. And the quality of your life and your career is going to be in direct proportion to what you know. And for the most part, how far you go in your career is going to depend on the people that you surround yourself with. And that's one reason a lot of people try to get into big firms, but really that's not the key to succeeding at the level you want. And your career really can be, and your life can be anything you want them to be. And the solution is relatively easy, but you need to take the right actions and you need to learn how to be around the right people. In business, politics, medicine, law, entertainment, and other pursuits, the most successful people do not spend their time hanging around others who are not like them. Instead, they seek out and are attracted to the winners. For kind of fun, I was taking acting classes years ago from a very famous acting coach. And it was so interesting, like all of the people that were in doing this acting, they were just aggressively, like people that wanted to succeed, they would seek out the people that could help them. So they would try to network. Everything was about networking. Like they would hang out in hotels where they thought they could meet successful people. They would try to go to all sorts of events where they felt like they could meet successful people, because all they're trying to do is they're trying to network and be around the most successful people. And that's how a lot of people become very successful in that particular genre of entertainment. They network, and they network as much as they can. Anybody that wants to act, anybody that wants to produce films, anybody that wants to do anything. The real skill often is their ability to network, and not even their talent sometimes. They have to have talent, but they seek out and they attract people that are winners. And it's just very interesting in LA, like how that works. People are just aggressively networking and trying to gain favor with the most successful people. I remember once I rented a house that I had to Bradley Cooper for I don't know, not very long, like 4 nights or something. And when he left all this very expensive champagne and as a gift, and he didn't have to do that, But he did that because he was just trying to gain favor with anybody that he thought in any way could help him in his career. And this was before he became famous and probably didn't have a lot of money and so forth. But he did that because he didn't know who I was, but he wanted people to say nice things about him. And of course, I'm saying nice things about him right now. And people that succeed at any level, whether it's business or whatever it is, they're seeking out and they're looking and attracted to people that are winning. If you think about Donald Trump, Bill Gates, or Jeff Bezos, do you think they're spending all of their free time or even their work time around people who are not trying to change the world and do great things? They get to those levels because that's what they do. They spend their days with meetings, discussions, and friendships with people that are just like them. And when they're not working, they spend their time reading and learning about things. It's interesting with Warren Buffett, like he spends most of his day reading books and learning. It's very interesting. This is one of the richest men in the world, and he's constantly learning in addition to the people that he's spending his time around. When you spend time around successful people, you're learning what sort of mistakes that they've made, and you don't make those mistakes yourself. You're learning about new opportunities, and you're learning how to be better at everything you do. It's interesting that Jeff Bezos, for example, was able to muscle his way into an early investment in Google, where he made probably hundreds of millions of dollars. And that investment, they weren't necessarily that excited about him doing that, but he had connections that got him in there and helped him make money. Just think about things like Bitcoin and early investors in that. I certainly didn't know anything about Bitcoin. And a lot of people that got in early on that also made hundreds of millions of dollars with minimal investments. So a lot of that happens to people that when they're around people, they learn about these things and connections. For example, like the Winklevoss twins, who argued that they helped start Facebook with Mark Zuckerberg. He gave them a lot of money to drop their claims, and then they took that money and invested in Bitcoin, and I think they made over $1 billion. But they had that information because of connections. And this is what people do when they're around other successful people or people that are doing things. They learn how to be successful and to succeed. Imagine someone like Jeff Bezos. He's probably networked and learned about opportunities thousands of times through his network. And this is one reason he's probably the most successful and one of the richest men in the world. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my background, and I hope this is inspirational to you to some extent, because I'm going to tell you how I went from being someone that was on a very bad path, probably being a postman or something, to what I am today. So when I was 14, I went to a public school in a just kind of middle class area of Detroit, and I was living with my mother. My dad graduated from Harvard, and he had all these different values. And I went to live with him at the age of 14. And there I learned a different way of thinking about school and thinking about achievement. And I was also exposed to kids that had different values. When I was with my dad every day, he would ask me how my classes went. He would just consistently ask me that. He would say nice things to me and make me feel good about myself when I did well in school. And then if I didn't do well in school, he would tell me how disappointed he was and even withdraw. So I felt like I needed to succeed somewhere. He pushed me to excel in competitive sports, run for student council, and do all these sorts of things that would distinguish me from other students so I could go to a school like Harvard. He told me never to be average. He encouraged me to spend time with motivated kids and constantly reminded me of what it takes to get into these top schools, just constantly, all the time. And that put a lot of pressure on me. And this was different. Prior to the age of 14, I had been living with my mother, and in her home, there was no push to do anything in particular. She thought it would be cool if I was a rock star, not a high achiever, but she really wanted me to be like a rock star because that's something that she admired and thought would be good. And the environment I was in, her friends would sit around the house often, drinking and smoking pot. And that was what I was exposed to. And this environment did not stress academics. It didn't stress leadership. It didn't really stress anything in particular other than being a rock star, if you can believe it. When I was 10, my mother bought me a guitar and started driving me to guitar lessons to learn electric guitar. I didn't really want to do that. So I didn't put a lot into it. And then I was encouraged in that environment to be wild and express myself and have a great voice. These are things that I wasn't even interested in, but I was pushed to do that. And if I was wild and got out there and did things that weren't necessarily all that great, she would think it was normal for someone that wanted to be a rock star. So I moved in with my dad, and I moved with him immediately after I moved in him. He got transferred to Bangkok, Thailand. And when I got to school there, I was around other kids from China that were taking school extremely seriously, and Japan that would be very serious about it. And it wasn't the kind of environment that someone would be that wanted to be a rock star. I mean, that sort of dream never would have worked there. And I'd never been at that point in my life around kids who were so serious about school. Almost everybody in this school was extremely motivated. Like that's what was expected in the countries they were from. And because of my home environment and my father pushing me to get good grades and the kids I was in school with, I started prioritizing instead of having no goals in particular, I started trying to get the best grades and would study like 5 or 6 hours a night because it was a competitive atmosphere and that's all you could do. And that was the dominant value system in that school. And I absorbed it and started doing well. And sports weren't emphasized as much because the school was in Bangkok and there weren't a lot of other schools to compete against. Compared to the school I had been in Michigan, there were no drugs. The school did random drug tests all the time. And they did that because obviously heroin and pot and stuff was readily available there. And if you were caught, you were expelled. And they just randomly would drug test people and bring them into the nurse's office, do that all the time. Sex and dating and things weren't important because the majority of the kids there, except some kids from Sweden and some Australians and Americans, which weren't the dominant people there. Most of the people were from pretty conservative cultures. And when I was in Detroit, before I left there, I was running around kids whose basically their dominant values were often dating and then drugs, but certainly most of them not school. They didn't talk about things about grades that much. They talked about girls, the guys. They started talking about where to get drugs. They started talking about concerts they wanted to go to and things like that. And then I had other friends that were athletes and played competitive soccer and tennis and stuff, but I didn't like those kids. And so I ended up spending the majority of my time with kids that weren't that successful. By the time I was 16, I started seeing my friends basically not doing much of anything. And they started talking about things like how much you could make working in a car factory per hour, how much postmen made. And most of them were not on a good path. Some people at that school were interested in going to college, but certainly not top schools. And because I was in a bad environment with my mother, and just screwed up by all this alcohol use and drug use and irresponsibility and all this stuff, it wasn't a good atmosphere. I was psychologically not in a good place. I didn't spend my time around the best kids. I spent my time with friends some were interested in going to college, but not the best schools. And the ones who wanted to go to college were interested in degrees where they could get jobs immediately after graduating, not really anything higher. There was no higher motivation. Their parents were pushing them. And so when I went to the school in Bangkok, it changed me. I came back to the United States, and instead of going to another one of these public schools, my dad got me into a very competitive private school, and where most of the kids were doing things like going to top colleges and then professional schools and so forth after that. And years ago, I remember attending a high school reunion, and almost everybody I met, even the kids that weren't the best students, were doctors and lawyers and investment bankers, and owned successful professional businesses and were financially doing very well. And one guy, I remember he went to Cravath, Swaine and Moore when he got out of law school, And so people were from that environment were very successful, and they were surrounded by other successful people because that's what the school emphasized, and that's how people did well there. There's schools, for example, in Los Angeles, like you have Harvard Westlake, where it's just like incredibly difficult and people there are incredibly motivated. But if you look at, you go online, you read Wikipedia and the list of successful graduates, it just goes on and on. And so people from that particular environment are pushed very hard to do well, and they do well. And certainly not all of them do, but compared to a local public school, it just blows the socks off. And the point I'm trying to make is that the people we are around and the people we're learning from shape who we become. And the people we learn and study about shape who we become. When you go to a very competitive law school, like a top 10 law school, and most of your peers are going to large law firms, you learn how to do that and you do your best to do that. And you're surrounded by people that are very motivated. And the difference between average college and an average law school is really you're not trying to go there because you're learning anything different. You're going there because you're surrounding yourself with successful people that are likely to become successful themselves. My daughter, I remember in eighth grade, went to a school in West Los Angeles. It was a private school, but it wasn't a very good private school, I don't think. And when she was there, she did not do well. She didn't get good grades, and the teachers at that school didn't really support her and push her to do well, and actually just didn't say nice things about her. And then she transferred to another school that she had been going to since kindergarten, like a private school, and suddenly was surrounded by much better teachers and much more motivated people. And now she's got in like early decision to the University of Chicago. I was like student council president and got good grades and took 10 APs before she was about no wait before she, almost 10 APs before she was a senior. And just all these other people at her school are motivated. They're going to several are going to like Yale, Stanford, all the Dartmouth and all these things. And out of a very small class of maybe 80 people. But none of that would have happened had she stayed in the school she was at. At the school she was at, almost all the students transferred to, when they graduated, went to Santa Monica Community College. The reason people like to go there is because if you get good grades, it's easy to transfer into UCLA and Berkeley and things. But no one from that school really was going to good schools. And I would submit to you that probably the kids from the school she originally attended were just as smart at the school she's at, but they were surrounded by successful people. So you can surround yourself with successful people anywhere. It doesn't matter where you went to law school. It doesn't matter where you went to college. But if you are in college or you're in law school, if you were to surround yourself and with groups and things that are the most successful, then you're likely to become very successful yourself. That's why people try to go to Harvard, because they're surrounded by people that have great goals. I remember when after I got out of high school, I went to the University of Chicago. And I certainly didn't know anything about going to professional schools like business school or law school. I didn't know, I'd never been surrounded by people that did that. Then when I went to that school, almost by the time I got there, I was surrounded by people that had goals of doing things like being a federal district judge or going to a really good law school. And I knew from them, and I was introduced that very quickly, that you need to get certain types of grades and this is what you need to do and this is what happens if you do that. And so I became very motivated to be a lawyer. And I don't think that would have happened had I gone to Michigan State or some local school in Michigan, which are very good schools, but I don't think that would have happened. And so the people that you're around, whether, when you're young, can shape who you ultimately become. It's very interesting. The environment you're in can shape how you succeed. The people you're around really do shape that. And I know for a fact, had I stayed in the public school I was in Michigan and not moved to Bangkok, Thailand, I wouldn't have gone to a good college. And honestly, I might have been in prison. One of my best friends, I remember coming back and meeting some of my friends that I've been friends with when I was in that high school. I had a group of 4 or 5 kids I hung around that weren't especially motivated. And I came back from Bangkok and went to that school. And then I remember going to a party and meeting one of these kids, and he was just like a complete stoner. Then I met another, and he started telling me about other people from my friend group. And One of them was in a juvenile delinquent place for hitting some guy with a pipe when they got into an argument, like a road rage incident. It was just amazing. These were the people that I was around. And had I stayed around them, I probably would have been the same and had a much different life. So just think about how that works. Think about how the life I would have had would have been so much different had I not been around people that were successful. You should think about your life and who are you spending time with and what's going to happen to you if you spend time with those kind of people. And the people you're around and learn about can shape who you become. In every law firm, there's always a contingent of people that are against the law firm and may not like the hours and are just there to work. And then they associate with other people that are likely to leave or may not be doing good work. And then they become tagged as people that are not for the firm. And the firm becomes, as an organization, against them and then ends up pushing them out. So any organization that functions well will always push people out that it believes are against them. And this is what happens in law firms. When I talk to people and why they're moving, a lot of times they have personalities and things where they have all of these expectations for their ego and things that they think are important. But at the same time, they're moving firms because they're not people that are for the law firm. They're not people that are for the people that they're working with. They associate with people like that. They associate with people that are unhappy, that move firms off, and all these sorts of things. And so then they don't become successful. And it doesn't matter, for example, that happens with people that go to top law schools. A lot of times, people that go to top law schools, they'll associate with people whose goal is to go in house or do something else or just practice law for a few years. And then that hurts them, even though they're very successful. And it happens, I would say, to probably as much as 50% of attorneys. They don't commit. They don't stay around the people that are going to be successful in the firm. They do all these things and that hurts them. Some people do it when they're in law school. Some people do it when they're in high school. But think about the futures of the people that you've known growing up and who did they associate with? Did they associate with people that are likely to become successful or did they associate with people that aren't? I have another daughter that goes to Malibu High and incredibly, the emphasis there compared to the school that my other daughter, my oldest daughter, went to, the emphasis there is on things like being a model or just not the same sort of emphasis and not school. And so kids that come out of that school, a percentage of them don't even go to college. A percentage of them just when they get out of college, when they get out of school, just go to local colleges and stuff and never do that well. But that compared to the school that my daughter went to, other daughter went to, it's completely different. So it's all about the people you're around, and it's all about how you learn from them and how that shapes you. And so many people don't understand that. They don't understand like why they're not succeeding. And a lot of it is just because of people that they're around. And our values are shaped by the decisions we make about where we spend our time and who we spend our time with. This is what makes you successful or unsuccessful. If you gravitate towards people and spend time with the most successful people and learn from them and do what they do, you're going to become better. I remember I was at this small thing with Anthony Robbins, and there were like 5 or 6 of us, and we were in a room with him. And we were like in his living room, and he said something that I thought was incredible. So when he got started as a motivational speaker, he was young and he gave a presentation. And at that point in his life, he didn't have a ton of money. And he gave a presentation, and someone there was very successful. He was part of a group of people that got together, like 10 or 11 people that were heads of major studios and extremely successful business people worth hundreds of millions of dollars or even more. And this guy saw him speak and was so motivated by him. He said, I would have this group of friends and we jet around to different places and meet, I don't know, 5 or 6 times a year. And in order to be part of this group, you got to pay $150,000 a year, some kind of me, or 200,000. I don't remember what it was. And Anthony Robbins said, "That's ridiculous. Why would I spend all this money?" And the guy said, "You don't understand. Like when you're around these people, you're going to rise to their level. And this is going to change your life. And you're going to become so much more successful than you would be if you were just going around giving these motivational speeches, because you're going to learn how these people think and how they invest and how they become successful and how they network and all these things. And so Anthony Robbins did it. And instead of this guy that was going around giving talks in hotels and small hotels and things around the country, all of a sudden he became much more successful and this kind of national figure, started putting ads on television, making tens of millions of dollars a year, like doing all these talks and stuff and selling products. And he learned all this, and it made him become very successful, much more successful than he would have been had he not invested all this money in doing this. There are organizations all over the country, like the Young Presidents Organization, that people want to get into to be around successful people. There's all these organizations and places that you can be part of that are going to enable you and to be successful, joining groups of people like that and having groups. Those people, when you're around the most successful people, will make you more successful. So I talked a little bit earlier about trying to go to the best colleges, the best law schools and law firms, because when you do that, you're going to be surrounded by other successful people. You're going to learn what they're doing, and you're going to pick up the ways of habits and thinking. So, for example, at a large law firm, they train you to be very detail oriented. They train you to be very responsive and quick. They train you to look at issues in a lot of depth. And so if you go to a large law firm and you're doing commercial litigation, your habits and your ways of thinking and the depth you go into issues and things are going to be different than they're going to be if you go into a firm and just do insurance defense. And if you go into a firm and do insurance defense, where often the work product isn't emphasized as much, where you have to do things quickly, you're going to become a different attorney than you would be if you were doing commercial litigation in a large law firm. If you're doing insurance defense, you should set as a goal for yourself to try to do commercial litigation. And if you're doing commercial litigation for a small firm, you should set your goals and trying to go to a larger firm doing that, because you're going to learn different habits and different ways of thinking depending on the type of people you're with. And I would even so much say that you'll become smarter. And working in a big law firm or working in the best law firm you can, it's not about prestige or money. It's about the people you're surrounded with and the type of work you're doing. I had a woman that I was working with recently, and she was a trust and estates attorney. And I don't even think that went to an unaccredited law school. So in California, there's all these law schools that aren't accredited by the ABA, but the California bar will still allow you to take the bar and be an attorney. And I don't know if you don't go to an unaccredited, if you go to an unaccredited law school, there's all these states that won't let you practice in them. So you have to practice in California. So I was working with this woman, and I got her an offer at this one trust and estates firm that did this like very sophisticated, like international trust and estates work. And it was a very good firm and would have provided her like very good people working there. And it was an incredible job for her. But she got this offer from them and then got an offer to be a contract attorney for another law firm, working remotely and making more money, but doing work that wasn't nearly as sophisticated and didn't even have the title as an associate. So instead of trying to put herself in a position where she was going to be successful and surrounded by very successful attorneys and learn this incredible area of trust and estates law that very few people did, even in the country, she chose to go to a firm where she was working remotely, where she wouldn't be in the office, but gave her a higher hourly rate than she would have made as an associate with hours and so forth at this better firm. So she chose money over learning, which is very dumb. So if you get a job at a law firm where you're going to be surrounded by better people, you're going to do better for the rest of your life and your career. That's why you should always try to work in the best law firm you possibly can. You're going to learn better habits, and you're going to learn how to be a better attorney. Working in-house or for the government often won't give you that sort of exposure. It won't expose you to people that are trying hard and going to be successful. And when you learn those habits and ways of thinking, you're going to become a better attorney and you're going to have a much better career. So you should always be thinking like, who am I surrounding myself with? What am I doing? Like, how am I learning? And your first few years of being an attorney, are about learning. They're about getting exposed to the highest level thinking and the highest level attorneys you can, because you're going to develop habits that can follow you the rest of your career. And if you surround yourself by people that are doing really good work, that are taking their work very seriously, you're going to be pushed to be the best person you possibly can be. And that's what a lot of times, most of the time, large law firms do with people. They take people that don't have the best work habits, that don't know how to practice law, that don't know how to look at issues in depth, where you're not working, where you're working around people that are going to be very successful in the legal profession, and you rise to their level. So, it's who you're around, and the best people by association are going to push you to be the best people, the best attorney you possibly can be. And if you don't want to be an attorney, then you need to find the people that are successful in other professions and then try to associate with them. Honestly, like realistically, if you wanted to be extremely successful and you really wanted to do it, you could become like Warren Buffett. He thinks about investing in business in a way that others can learn. And if you were to spend all of your time with him, meaning you sat around with him every day and you watched what he was doing and you talked to him and you spent years with him, I have no doubt that you could become extremely successful and worth tens of millions, if not more than that, in terms of your net worth. And he would teach you, but you would have to spend time with him and learn what he's doing. You could also study him. Other people have done that and become successful. And his investment strategy has been the subject of countless books. He published his thoughts about what he's doing before his investment conferences and exposes people to that. He literally could be an open book and teach you everything that you know about his methods and so forth very quickly. And if you had enough time to study his ways of thinking and his actions, you too could be very successful on your way to becoming the best investor in the world and the richest as well. I know people that became personal injury attorneys, but they worked for someone that was very successful, and they learned how those people got cases and how they brought in work and how they negotiated with people that they were suing in settlements. And they learned all these things and then started their own personal injury firms and became very successful. And it's like that, like in every practice area, the people you surround yourself with will determine how successful you are. I know people that worked in really big firms, and then those firms laid a lot of people off for whatever reason. But they had surrounded themselves and were close with the most powerful partners, and the powerful partners help them get work. If you're working in a law firm, you should be trying to work for the most successful partners there, because they're going to teach you. And then when they teach you, they can help you. And no one understands this. The difference between the people you're spending your time with and the people you're not spending your time with are going to determine what happens to you. Who are your friend groups? Are your friend groups people that are going to be successful, or are your friend groups people that are not going to be successful? What's interesting also, and I may talk about this a little bit on a different slide, but when you leave like someplace like Los Angeles, and then maybe you go to a town in Indiana or something, a smaller town, the people there a lot of times, and I'm not being critical of this, but the people oftentimes will be overweight. You can see just all these people, everyone's overweight, and that's the culture there. Those are what the people do. They eat. In Ohio, I know that I have some relatives that live in a relatively small area there, fast food restaurants everywhere, and everyone eats fast food and their diets aren't good. And they have these heart disease problems or whatever, cholesterol problems, and because that's the norm for there. And when you're in Los Angeles or where I'm at in Malibu, it's just a completely different culture. Every different things are emphasized, like fitness and all of these things. And where I'm in Michigan, I probably wouldn't be like that kind of person. I wouldn't make my diet and exercise and stuff a big deal. So this is what happens. Like the people that you're around will determine how successful you are. They might even determine how long you live. If you spend all your time with people that drink all the time, I have a lot of friends that like to drink, and a lot of them got cancer and all these health problems, and their work suffered, and they've moved between firms all the time when people have to discover they're alcoholics. And so all of this stuff, like the people you spend your time with, you're spending time with people that drink too much? Are you spending your time with people that use drugs? Are you spending your time with people that share your interests? And it doesn't matter with fitness, it doesn't matter with anything, but if you're around highly motivated people, you're going to rise to their level. And think about it from school, think about it from the firms you've been in, think about it from everything that you've done. And are you taking your time to surround yourself with people that are likely to be successful? Because there's studies on it. It's been proven that the more successful people you spend your time with, you're going to rise to the level. And the less successful people you spend your time with, you're probably going to, that those sorts of behaviors that may not be the best for being successful are going to influence that, because that's how you're going to get reinforcement with that. I remember several instances where if you're part of a group of people that aren't successful or not doing well, if you start becoming successful, you're not going to be successful as well. And that can hurt you. I remember when this is years ago, like probably 25 years ago or something like that. I was good friends with a guy that had gone to my high school and then University of Michigan Law School and was working in Los Angeles. And he drank a lot. Like he drank a lot, like probably every night of the week. And he kept these gallon jugs of, I'd never seen anything like it, of vodka, like in his freezer, like these giant gallon jugs. And I used to go out and drink with him. And then one time I was talking to his wife and saying, this lifestyle is just not really for me. And she said, if you stop drinking, he's not going to be friends with you anymore. So just think about that. Like you're part of a group of people that drinks a lot. You're probably, if you start trying to improve yourself, you're not going to be friends with them. So it's just to think about things in that way. Spending time with certain types of people are going to influence how you are. A lot of people move to New York because there it's just a very high-paced environment where the standards can often be very high and it's competitive, and it has to be because office space is more expensive, the cost of living is more expensive. So people tend to really rise to a much higher level there than they would if they were in smaller markets and smaller firms. I remember working in New York, and people that were there at big firms, I remember I worked in a big firm, would always talk down to people from smaller firms and catch all these errors and make all these arguments and just have this sense of superiority. And it was actually well earned because they were doing much better work, and the clients that hired them would get better results. And if they hired firms in smaller markets, oftentimes I was reading Michael Dell's biography not too long ago, and he was talking about how he took his company public and all these things. And he was, I think, in Austin or something, or Houston, I don't remember, started talking about when he was going to do this, he started going to New York a lot, and he was hiring firms like Wachtell and things that had these incredibly high standards because he knew they would do much better. And those attorneys that go to Wachtell become better attorneys because they're surrounded by other attorneys that are doing really good work. So you should always try to surround yourself with the best attorneys. And if you're not, you need to make a goal to surround yourself with better and better attorneys. I know people that got out of law school and failed the California bar 3 times, and then they finally passed it, and they started out with a small firm, and then they committed to doing the absolute best work they could and getting really good experience there and doing everything that they could. Then they moved to a bigger firm, then a bigger firm, and pretty soon they were at one of the top 50 law firms in the world with business, lots of business, because everywhere they went, they surrounded themselves with the people that were doing the best in these firms, and it made them do better. What kind of firm are you in? What type of market are you in? If you move to a bigger market and a bigger firm, you're going to be surrounded probably by more motivated people. A lot of markets, it's normal to bill 12, 1,500 hours a year, and the attorneys you're around are happy with that, and they tend not to do the best work. Different firms that you could be in have different types of ways of doing things, that some are very motivated and they're trying to do the absolute best work they can, and others aren't. And so you need to think about that. What kind of firm are you in right now? How can you move to a different firm where people are more motivated and doing better work? And so you need to surround yourself with these types of people, and you need to get into firms where there's higher standards. You need to get into firms where you can learn how to develop a book of business from people, developing a book of business. So most people, when they go into large law firms, or mid-sized law firms, they never develop a book of business. And oftentimes it's because when they're there, they just act like employees. They don't try to really learn from the people there that are the most successful. They don't try to get in very close proximity to the best partners. Oftentimes, they don't associate and spend their time with the attorneys that are the most motivated in going places. And this is what people do. So, colleges, law firms, friend groups, all this sort of stuff can make a huge difference. And it doesn't really matter where you start out. You can always find people that are on the right path. You can always move to a bigger firm. You can always move to a practice area that is going to give you more opportunities. All these things are important. And if you don't do them, you're not going to reach the level of success you want. I will submit to you that there are some exceptions. There's some very big firms that are never going to get beyond your educational qualifications. But if you learn how to develop business and you learn how to get big clients, it does not matter where you went to law school or how well you did there, or even what firm you're currently with. You can change the entire direction of your career and your life. I know an attorney, I'm not going to say his name because I don't want to be a little bit inaccurate. I don't want to be caught on it, but I know someone that developed $100 million book of business. And when he started his firm, it was just him. It was just him and maybe three other people. And he didn't have a lot of work. So he started cold calling people that needed someone to help them with employment defense work. And so he would get lists of everyone that was sued every day. And for employment matters, he would call them and say, I'm going to give everything I have to your case if you hire me. I used to work in a big firm. I can help you. Please give me this work. And so he started getting these employment defense cases, which at the time, the billing rates weren't high and didn't pay a lot of money. And so he kept doing those. And then when he got them, he would try to get close to the people that were giving out cases to different law firms. And he did good work on the employment matters he was given. It really gave it his all. And then he would go and take the general counsels, if they were there, out to dinners and meet with them. And he would try to get close to the CEO and the founders of the company. And then when they started getting larger cases against them, like commercial litigation, he was right there because he had done everything he could to put himself in front of the most powerful people in those companies. And he started getting larger and larger cases. And then his firm started growing. And then when his firm started growing, he got more and more, he was able to associate with even more powerful people inside of companies and so forth. And then one year he got this incredible case by a fluke where he represented General Motors in a big case, and it was all over the Wall Street Journal and it was all over national newspapers, and his firm got all this publicity, and they started taking that publicity and growing as a firm that was like this really hot litigation firm in Los Angeles. And now the firm has over 1,000 attorneys. It's Quinn Emanuel, and all of that happened based on, I guess I'll say his name, John Quinn's ability to constantly get in front of more and more important people. And then when he did that, he was able to start getting big cases. He was able to start hiring attorneys from top law schools, and everyone started wanting to work there. And it became a very successful firm. And then those successful people that were hired from these great schools were able to get other people there that were from those great schools because people wanted to be associated with a firm where there were lots and lots of really good people. And people have gone on from that firm to be a lot of them worth hundreds of millions of dollars and involved in all this very sophisticated litigation, not even there, just learning how to do these cases and things. And I know a lot of people from there that did that. And so amazing, just the people that you're around in a firm can really change the direction of your career and the direction of your life. Now, there are some exceptions if you want to work in the largest U.S. law firms. There's places like Wachtell and Gibson Dunn and Cravath and Latham and so forth, where you're going to have a very hard time getting in there if you don't have those types of qualifications. But they're from your academics and so forth. But in order to do that, it's going to be very hard. But you still, even if you couldn't get into those firms, you could be very successful by learning a niche like class action litigation or asbestos litigation and filing all these significant lawsuits. When I was in law school, I wrote a book about personal injury attorneys. And I remember interviewing this guy. His name was, there was a firm called Corboy and Dimitro in Chicago, and I interviewed Corboy, and he was at the very bottom of his class from not great law school in Chicago, but he became the best personal injury attorney in Chicago and had an incredibly successful practice and learned how to do that from someone else and became like a world leader and someone that everyone knew about. And so, what would you need to do to become extremely successful? You would need to go to conferences and network and make friends with the most successful lawyers out there. And it's more than just learning how to do a practice area, it's learning how to learn the habits and what the best people do. And if you do that, you can really get very far in your career. And I had to, when I was surrounded by a bunch of kids that took school extremely seriously, it didn't mean that I was going to be like them, but it meant that I had to start learning how they did things when they studied and their priorities. And those became very important to me just because I was surrounded by those people. Had I gone to a school where everyone was not doing that, the opposite would have happened. I'm always amazed when I look at, because I went to Detroit, the Detroit public schools, nothing happens to the kids that go there. It's just absolutely incredible, a lot of these schools, because they're never around people that take things seriously. The teachers don't take things as seriously as they could, and they don't rise to a high level. They have these horrible lives that where nothing ever happens. And so when I went to this top school, I was trying to get the best grades possible. I surrounded myself with the best in my teachers. I asked them questions. I made friends from with kids that took school seriously, and they would always tell me what they were doing and how many hours they were studying per night. So I felt like I needed to do the same thing. And so I had to commit, and I learned how to do that all the way till I graduated from law school. While you could learn from, you can't, Warren Buffett's not going to sit down with you, but if you wanted to learn how he invested and so forth, you could very quickly follow his advice. And what most people do, by the way, when they learn about what Warren Buffett does or something, they get distracted by other investments that they think look better or going to promise them faster results. And because that happens, nothing ever happens to them in terms of their careers. So, when if you want to be like Warren Buffett, he tends to buy stocks and buy companies when things are depressed and there's not a lot of enthusiasm there, and he knows that things will come back. And so other people that are investing that may be trying to do what he's doing, they'll purchase stocks and things when it looks like the market's continually going up and everyone else is purchasing the same thing. And they will invest when he's not investing, and then they'll lose money and never do well in the stock market. And this is what happens in the majority of index funds and things like where people just don't have a consistent strategy. And so they don't succeed. There's ways to become a very successful partner in a major law firm. And you can do it, like I said earlier, by just getting a lot of business. I know a guy that started out as a solo practitioner and now works in a major law firm and has a book of business, like I talked to you about earlier, huge books. And this is the attorney I talked to you about earlier, John Quinn. What did he do that made him so successful? He spent hours cold calling every morning. He invested a lot of time into that. And most attorneys wouldn't do that. They wouldn't go out and get business. I remember I was talking to a law firm that had a very small office in Los Angeles, and the attorneys there were just incredible. When I gone to Caltech, and then from there, I'd gone to Stanford or something and done really well there. And there was another one that had very similar qualifications, and the firm had hired me to bring in people that had a lot of business. And so I interviewed those two attorneys that were in the office, and they were like very hostile to my efforts. Like they went in and they read some of my blog articles, and one was about something stupid like colonics or something. It was a funny article, and they just brought that up right away and really tried to push me away to not do well. And so I called up the partner that had hired me to find people for that. And he said, yeah, like those two attorneys are people that just rely on others to give them work and think that work should come to them based on their qualifications. And because of that, they've never been successful. They just do the work that we give them, but they don't want people around that have business because that's going to make them look bad. And it was very interesting. Like those two attorneys were just working in that office alone and weren't doing well and didn't want to be around people that were doing well either. They thought that work should come to them. And most attorneys would not prospect for business the way John Quinn did. Most attorneys would not then try to network with all of the people they were getting business from and get better and better business. Most people would not be willing to commit. And and most attorneys are often happy just John Quinn, he could have sat there doing labor and employment forever, but he had higher goals and he knew what he wanted. And because he knew what he wanted, he was able to take a small firm of just a few people and he dreamed of doing something different. And that made him become very successful. He took all the right actions and he learned from people. And I remember one point he said he was holding I've told this story before, but every month he would have this thing where he sat down with one of the partners in the firm and they talked about things that they were doing. And he said, and this is a point when his firm was growing like a lot, doing very well. And he said, one of the biggest mistakes that I made was not networking more and better with the attorneys I went to Harvard Law School with. And I thought that was very interesting. So he realized how important that networking was. And he realized that he'd made mistakes when he was in law school by not networking and surrounding himself with people that were like going to be successful. And the way to lose weight, by the way, it's very simple, is just to eat less, for example. And most people that are trying to lose weight never really follow the simple advice. And this is very simple advice. You just eat less and things that are better. But instead, they'll do things like buy weight loss pills, they'll read books, they'll buy exercise equipment, they'll do all these sorts of things, but nothing ever happens or sticks. And instead, they spend their time studying different fads and so forth and never actually lose weight because they're unable to follow the simple advice. And instead of reading and dreaming about something, you just need to do it and take action. And it's not about doing all these other things, it's about doing one thing. Action when things don't work and just continually getting better and better. And so you learn what you need to do and you have to take the actions that are going to get you to where you're going. You have to realize that there's no simple way of doing things. There's no simple way of building a law firm from scratch to something huge unless you're cold calling, unless you're setting bigger and bigger goals for yourself, and unless you're networking with people. So you need to surround people that are doing well. Years ago, I met a man, made hundreds of millions of dollars running this real estate seminar company. And then he retired from this at a very young age, maybe 40 or something, and decided to spend the rest of his life after selling this company trying to figure out what was the most important thing that made people happy and successful. Like, how do people become happy and successful? And he deep dived into this. He traveled around the world. He tried to meet everybody he could that was successful, that had a philosophy of what is it that makes you happy and fulfilled and successful. And he spent 5 years studying this. And he did something very interesting. He came to Los Angeles and he hired this guy to find and network to all the most successful people that he could. And then he took them into a big dining room. And I was part of this group at Spago in Beverly Hills. And he started talking about this philosophy and he wanted to create a lot of people talking about him and this philosophy. And he spent 5 years doing this, literally 5 years. And his conclusion was, after spending 5 years doing this, that the people that we surround ourselves with, their values and the things that believe are most important to making us happy and successful. That was his conclusion. And it's probably one reason why I'm talking to you about this today. But that's what he concluded, that one simple thing. And imagine going around the world and meeting the different gurus and different religions and all these sorts of things that he threw himself into. This is what he concluded after 5 years of doing this. So you're going to be successful to the extent that you spend your time around people that are successful. You're going to be successful to the extent that you read about and learn about people that are successful. And you're going to be successful to the extent that if you're not around people that are happy and successful, you're probably going to be that way as well. I know one attorney I think he's not in Los Angeles, but he's Maybe I think he's in the Northern California, and he's very interesting. Like he became an extremely successful attorney at a large law firm, and he like listens to podcasts and things from very successful people, every books and things, every chance he gets. He does it when he's in the car. He does it when he's doing reviewing documents and things. So instead of just doing something simple like that, he's surrounding himself with the best advice he possibly can to improve every single day. I remember Schmidt from Google was giving some sort of presentation and being interviewed, and he said you should be watching YouTube videos all the time of people that are doing really well. That will help you become successful rather than just watching shows on TV. And this guy who had started success during our conversation, I had a conversation with him and started discussing people that go to these top ranked private schools and where a lot of people come out and are very successful. And he believed that the reason these people became successful is because they surrounded themselves with people that had high standards and thought in a certain way, were committed to trying hard, found ways of doing things, whether it was academic, sports, leadership, or whatever it was. It doesn't matter if you're an athlete, you should be doing that. Anything you want to do, if you want to be a successful politician, you should do the same thing. I remember I was talking to a guy that had been a professor at Syracuse Law School. This is where Biden went. And he told me, he was a tenured professor. He said that Biden was actually dead last in his law school class, like dead last. And how does someone like Biden go from that to being president of the United States? And it's all about his ability to network and get around successful people and have those people have his back and able to network with the right people, learn how to be a politician. If you surround yourself with these people, you're going to succeed as well. I like to read books about successful people all the time. And I read these books and it helps me in business and it helps me a lot of different things. It helps me learn how to do things in a certain way. So not just surrounding myself with successful people, but learning what successful people have done and trying to pick up just a little bit. If you learn like one of these rules from a book or a podcast or a book on tape, it's going to help you. It's going to make you more successful. It's interesting, like Reed Hastings, who founded LinkedIn, he became obviously founded LinkedIn. And one of the ways that he became successful is he spends like all of his time like going out to lunch and meeting other successful people and learn what they're doing, whether it's investing or in business. He just spends all of his time trying to learn from these people. So again, if you spend your time around people with certain habits and think about the world in a certain way, then you learn those beliefs and then you'll become like them and you'll know what it takes to be successful. You understand their values, then you'll look back oftentimes and you won't even realize what made you successful, but really it's the people that you spent your time around. I talked about weight loss, but I also talked about being in Malibu. And when I walk around Los Angeles, when I live in Malibu, for example, like my time, a lot of my spare time, I spend with my girlfriend. We get up at 5:30 and I'm in the office by 6. And sometimes I get up earlier than 5:30 and then I exercise at lunch and I don't eat lunch. And then I come home and typically have a fairly small dinner. And on the weekends, I have my kids. But my girlfriend, for example, was raised in Malibu and her father was a model and she used to be a competitive athlete and she was a model. And because people around her thought that was the right thing to do. And she actually graduated from Harvard and became a model. And when had she been in like Washington, D.C. and not Malibu, probably her values would have been different. Maybe she would have been interested in politics, but now because of where she was, grew up, her values are being a good surfer and so forth. If she'd been from a working class town in Ohio, her values would have been different. So just think about that. Just even the city that you're in can shape your values. I talked about New York earlier, like all these different things could be much, much different. And she would be probably a much different person depending on where she grew up and the values of people there. And because I spent all my time with her, those sorts of things became started to become my values as well. And I read books every weekend. I hire coaches to make me accountable and keep me on track and to share their ideas that they're picking up from other people about what makes them successful. I have mission statements that I read each morning. I have life goals, annual goals, quarterly goals, daily goals, and I do everything I can to really keep myself on track. And my goals are important. And so you have to have goals and you have to surround yourself with the right people. And then Even a company has to have goals. Our company has quarterly goals, and I review these each quarter. And I spend my time going to conferences and to get new ideas. And I wouldn't make as many placements as I do and help as many people had I not surrounded myself, learned all these things and had goals I wouldn't do as well. And my candidates wouldn't do as well. And I probably wouldn't be as fit if I was spending my time with someone that doesn't emphasize that. And I wouldn't have the effort to commit to this profession and do if I didn't, have the best fitness. All of these things, I'm just trying to really pound home to you the importance of these goals and the importance of the people you surround yourself with and the importance of learning and how that can change the person you are, regardless of where you are right now. If you do these things and you learn these things and you make self-improvement a major goal in your life, you're going to become successful. I've met all these people that started going to Tony Robbins conferences or listening to his by MP3s and things, used to be CDs, and literally their whole lives and careers changed because they just got this inspirational information and they learned all these things and these ways of thinking that can make you successful. And you need to do that. And you need to really do that. Just in conclusion, people that you're around are going to contribute, and that's going to rub off and you make you successful. You need to study what other people are doing that makes them successful. You need to take action in response to that. And if you don't take action, nothing is going to happen. What I'd like to see from you is, what are you going to do to change your situation? Like, how are you going to seek out other people that are successful? And if you're in an environment right now where you there's not those people, you can start reading and learning, and you can make things happen in your life and career. But you need to know, what other people are doing, and you need to learn about that. And it's very important, because regardless of where you are right now, I don't care if you have 20 years of experience, you can still learn all this, and it can be tremendously helpful for you, and you can literally change the direction of your life. I hope that what I've said has been helpful, and I hope you can take action based on what I've talked about. And again, I've seen the attorneys that I see that succeed. It's all about who they spend their time with and the goals that they have. That's it. They do things that people that aren't succeeding do not do. And so you need to do what is going to make you successful. You need to surround yourself at work with the people that are most likely to be successful. You need to surround yourself with the partners that are most likely that are successful. You need to spend your time outside of work with people that are going to be successful. Think about being around people that have a very negative view of work, or think about being around people that just have a very negative view of their lives. That you tend to become like them. A good friend of mine is getting divorced right now. He was a partner at Quinn Emanuel, and he retired at a very young age, like 45 or something, because he did very well there, millions of dollars a year in that business. And so he did that for maybe 10 or 15 years. And so he retired, and then he moved to Malibu as well, where I live. And I've stayed in touch with him. And his wife, like all of her friends and things, started getting divorced, and her sister got divorced. And so all of a sudden, she was around all these women that were getting divorced, and they would say things about their husbands that were making them get divorced. And she would say, "Oh, my husband's doing the same thing." What ended up happening is one day she just decided to divorce him. And I don't think that would have happened to him had his wife not been surrounded by other people that were doing that. So you need to be very careful. I know another guy, he started a very successful company processing credit cards, and he also did very well. And he sold that company and started another one. And he got divorced. And then when he got married to his new wife, he would literally like interview her friends surreptitiously, but he would talk to them, and he would, if these women were happy in their marriages and things were going well, then he would encourage her to be friends with them, because he learned that his previous wife, when she started surrounding herself with people that weren't doing well in their marriages and unhappy, that she became unhappy as well. So just think about that if you're surrounding yourself with people that are getting divorced, you might get divorced. All of these sorts of things can influence the type of person you are. There's small towns in America where you get married, that's it. You're probably going to stay married because that's the values. There's religions that have those values. So you surround yourself in a certain religion, you're going to be around people that have certain values. I shouldn't even talk about this, but anyway, I've been exposed to different religions. I've been exposed to Judaism, I've been exposed to Christianity, and I've been exposed to all of these different religions, and they definitely have different values. And the people that have those values are different, and it changes who you are. Your religion changes who you are and your values. So what are you surrounding yourself with the right people? Are all of this stuff? What are the groups you're part of? All these things are going to determine how successful you are. And some people are in environments where maybe the firms aren't that good or on things, but you can get out of there and you can read what we can read and set goals and just become more successful. So that's my message for you today. I will take a quick break just for 2 or 3 minutes. And then when I come back, I'll answer questions. I'll answer questions about anything you may have questions about today. You don't have to ask questions about this kind of motivational talk of spending your time with the right people and continuously learning and setting goals. You can ask questions about anything that's related to this presentation or just in your career in general. Sometimes you may be in a place where you're not doing well, you may not have a job, or you may be underemployed, or you may just have not been succeeding, and ask questions that can help you with that. And so any questions you ask, I will answer, and I will stay as long as it takes to answer your questions. So I would encourage you just to think about your career, and is there anything that you feel you could be doing differently, or things that may make you stuck, or if you're very successful, how you can become even more successful. And so I'll do that when I come back, and then I will take all the questions you have. So just a 1 or 2 minute break, and then I'll be back. Thank you. All right, so just 1 second, and I will get to questions. I'm just opening up a Word document. All right, so we'll go to questions. Give me 1 second. Okay. So again, just feel free to ask questions about anything that you have, and I'm happy to answer. And my goal for you really is to become extremely successful, to look back, on your career, 5 years from now or whatever it is, and really learn from a lot of the things that I'm talking about today. So let's go to questions. The next one, first question. You have mentioned that it's good to write articles to show expertise on topics. You have a website to publish articles to. I only have a firm bio, my law firm's website, where I could post articles to where people can find them. Do people have their own website outside of their law firm's website? Sure, you can have your own website outside of a law firm's website, and you can publish your own articles there. You can publish as many as you want. And then on those articles, you can just basically say the firm you're at. And I'll tell you that writing articles can be a really smart thing. I had something happen once where I had this very serious legal problem where several $1 million were at issue, and I couldn't find anyone that had expertise in this topic that I had the problem with. And so I looked up online and I did a search for this topic, and I only found one lawyer in Northern California that he'd actually written a short article about this topic. And I called him, and he was the first person I wanted to hire. So having articles about different things and that clients may be seeking information about is very important. I had this guy once that he quit a big firm. His goal was to be one of the most successful legal recruiters in the country. That's just what he wanted to do. And so I encouraged him to do everything he could to build up his bio. I encouraged him to do as many presentations as he could. I encouraged him to write articles that would appear in national legal publications, or to do interviews and really to become an expert. And so he did that, and now he has a very successful legal recruiting firm in Washington, D.C., one of the top legal recruiting firms there for people that want to move firms in Washington, D.C., because when people look at his bio on the website, he's giving all these talks, he's doing all of this stuff, he's getting quoted in newspapers and things all the time, and he looks like the absolute best choice for someone to hire. And that's in contrast to almost all the recruiters that I've ever hired. Most of the recruiters I've ever hired think that writing articles is a waste of their time. They think that giving presentations is a waste of their time. And instead, they're just this culture that a lot of other recruiters develop, where all they want to do is make placements and make money. They never really think about the long-term impact of their career of doing these things. And so They're always working for other people, and there's nothing wrong with working for other people, but they never really reach their full potential and they don't look like the best choice. So go out and look at recruiting firm websites and look at what they're doing in my profession. And most of the recruiters there basically just say, we're a recruiter, we're really good. And some of them will say, we're recruiters, we're really good. We went to Harvard Law School or Michigan Law School or whatever, and you should hire us or use us as your recruiter based on that. What would you think of? What kind of recruiter would you want to use? Would you want to use a recruiter that has all these articles and presentations and so forth? Would you, or that makes them look like an effort? I mean, like a better recruiter, would you want to use someone that just said they went to a good law school, or maybe someone didn't go to a good law school and they say, I'm a recruiter? This is what most people do in my industry. And for that reason, most of them never reach their full potential. So yes, you should be doing that. You should be doing what other people aren't doing. Set goals for yourself and look like the best person. It's like that if you hire a doctor. Would you hire a doctor that just says they're a doctor? Or would you hire someone that has a really beefed up bio and stuff? This is what you need to do. And this is something that most attorneys don't do. They think it's enough just to be an attorney. Like just to be an attorney, they think that's enough to be successful. And it's not. You have to do what other people aren't doing. Okay, I graduated from good law school, passed the bar exam in Colorado, which requires 260 plus, I guess, score, but was not admitted to practice. What alternative careers in the legal field in adjacent industries would you recommend? I do not want to go through the bar exam process again. Does BCG serve people in my position? I graduated in the top 30% of my class and received a certificate with my Juris Doctor. Okay, so I don't know what happened. It sounds like you might not have passed the character and fitness or something. If you didn't pass the character and fitness in Colorado, you may pass it in other states. So I don't know why you would limit yourself to not being an attorney just because you didn't pass the character and fitness in Colorado. I've seen people have been felons and end up being admitted to the bar. If you're not admitted to the bar, what other type of alternative paths are available? You can often work in the government doing different things that don't require a bar exam, but would be good or adjacent to the legal field. You can work in companies. You can start businesses doing, I don't know, document reviewing. There's all sorts of things that you can do. But I guess my question to you would be, why would you want to be in the legal field if it's not welcoming to you? Is that really the best use of your talents and your time? Or would you be better off putting your efforts and time into something where it can lead to a lot of things? That would be how I would think about it. What is the best use of my efforts and what is the best use of my time? Do you want to put it into a field that's not welcoming, or do you want to put it into a field where you can do? I've seen people like start all sorts of businesses, pizza chains, like all sorts of things that, because they learn how to work hard and how to be detail-oriented in law school. BCG, I mean, this is just all we do is place people in law firms as attorneys. We couldn't help you, but there's books out there, alternative careers for attorneys and all these different things that you could potentially do. And you don't need to be an attorney, but for anybody, if the legal practice, if you can't even get the bar, you pass the bar, but you can't get admitted. I just don't know if that's the best use of your time, because attorneys, people that go to law school, like when they go into other professions, they often discover that those people aren't as smart as them and it's much easier for them. So I would recommend probably something outside the legal field, but you could do recruiting if you wanted to. You could all these different professions, but I would strongly recommend that you think about maybe doing something else, because why would you be part of a profession that isn't going to allow you to work as an attorney? But I'm not trying to not motivate you, but my advice to you would probably be to try to get into another state where maybe, or take the bar there where you potentially could pass a character and fitness. Okay, how can someone who didn't attend a top college or law school still access the same kinds of networks and mindsets later in their career? I've worked in smaller firms and didn't have much exposure to top tier mentors. Are there specific strategies or environments I should seek out to stimulate that kind of influence and start leveling up my thinking, or is it too late to make up for that kind of early professional conditioning? Okay, so if you graduate from law school at the age of 25, you have roughly 50 years that you can practice law. So that's two times your time on earth so far. So I've seen attorneys in their 80s practicing law. What do? You can learn about different practice areas. You can take courses about how to be a trust and estates attorney. There are courses that people teach online about how to get business in different practice areas. You can do all these things, and you can become any type of person you want. You can start your own firm and start trying to learn and become a better attorney by joining different bar associations that have groups of people that do that. You join, if you want to be a trust estate attorney, you join the group in your city of trust and estates attorneys and learn from them. And you can, network. You can start really at the bottom, working for a really successful solo practitioner and learn how they do things. There's most solo practitioners, there's a lot of them out there. I was working with a woman recently that wanted to do plaintiff's employment work because she was very into women's rights and things like that. She was at a firm doing healthcare litigation, which wasn't completely related. And I found for her this solo practitioner that had spent like the first 7 years of his career at Latham and Watkins. And he had gotten a couple good verdicts or settlements. And so he decided to expand his firm. And she got a job working for him. And I placed her with them. She didn't go to a top law school. She didn't have experience in like major law firms, but she got a job working for him. And the most valuable thing about that for her was she's going to learn like the type of work that he expects. And so she's going to be around someone like him. So you can research people in your city, like solo practitioners or small law firms that do your kind of work, and you can try to get in with them and learn the habits of successful attorneys there. And it doesn't matter what practice area you're in. You can do it in labor and employment. You can do it in personal injury. You can do it in all these different practice groups and learn. So you need to learn. You need to learn a practice area, and then you need to try to surround yourself with attorneys that are going to teach you in that practice area to be the most successful. And anyone can do it. You can do it. I know all sorts of people. I was in this business group with this guy that was a personal injury attorney. He got out of law school and didn't even practice law. And then after a couple of years, he got a job with this guy that was doing personal injury and becoming very successful. And he learned how he did it and started his own firm, and now is extremely successful. You can do all these things if you surround yourself with the right people and you learn, and you can do it all sorts of ways. Every practice group pretty much has bar associations associated with it. You can learn from those people. Every practice group you could possibly be in, there's oftentimes there's websites and things that teach people how to become successful and get business. There's all sorts of ways to get business. If you do trust in the estates, you go into old people's homes and you give presentations about how to have a good will or something, and then people hire you. This is what they do. Or all these different things you can learn how to become successful, really in any practice area out there. It doesn't really matter what that practice area is. Okay, let's see here. One point that resonated with me, was how attorneys often refuse to do certain types of work or take on lower status roles, even temporarily. I've been very selective about assignments because I want to maintain a strong professional reputation, but now I'm wondering if that's hurting my growth. How do you balance maintaining your professional image with being open to work that might be considered beneath you at your current level? Okay, so let's talk about lower status roles real quick. So the first thing with lower status roles is no one, I don't care who you are, no one has to be a contract attorney. If you're a contract attorney, you're sending a message to future employers that you will do work at a low hourly rate that is maybe not the highest level of work you can do, and you're willing to settle for that. Anybody can get an associate position in a law firm because there are tens of thousands of law firms out there, and then there's hundreds of thousands of attorneys that are solo practitioners that are very good. So no one needs to take a lower status role. You can always be an associate, and you should be an associate. And if you are older, then you should not be a contract attorney. You can be you don't have to, because there's so many people out there that will hire you. It's crazy to think you need to. So when you're working in a law firm, you shouldn't be selective about assignments. You need to do what you're asked to do, and you can't get a reputation as someone that's not doing certain types of work, because then you're not viewed as a team player. If you're not viewed as a team player, then people are not going to like that. Now, there's nothing wrong with trying to get work from the most successful attorneys in your practice area, like that you should be doing. But every law firm has work that's not that great, and you need to do that in order to learn. And it's not going to change your professional reputation. It's going to make you a team player at your firm, and it is going to hurt your growth if you're not taking the work you're given. Everybody should do what's asked. And if you don't do what's asked, you're going to get in trouble and people aren't going to like you. And it can literally destroy your career. I've known several attorneys that had their careers destroyed or almost destroyed by refusing to take down assignments. When I was at Dewey Valentine in Los Angeles, there was a guy that was like a 14th year attorney or something. And he learned that he wasn't going to be partner on like a Friday night. And he was very upset about it. And a partner that had a lot of business that was in charge of making people partner that he wasn't doing any work for and he wasn't close with came into his office like the day after that, just not doing something very demeaning to him and tried to give him this assignment that maybe a second year associate could do. And he gave him the assignment. The guy said, I'm not going to do it. This is ridiculous. You're just picking on me. And then the partner came into his office like maybe an hour later and he had a check and he said, I'm going to give you two choices. One, you can sign this check I can give you this check and you can sign this release and leave right now, or you're fired. And you can resign and take this check and sign this agreement, or you're fired. So he took the check and signed the agreement and left the firm. And it all happened because he turned down an assignment. I know a guy that had a job in Silicon Valley and he was hired. And when he was hired, they told him he'd be able to do white collar work. And so they didn't have any white collar work. And they started asking him to do litigation work. And instead of doing the work, he turned it down and said, I'm here to do white collar work. And they fired him. And he ended up becoming a contract attorney. I saw one guy in Washington, D.C. that was given an assignment and he was told to bill a certain number of hours on it. And then he said, I found the solution. I don't need to bill these hours. And it was for a young partner that wanted to have a lot of hours billed in the matter. He got fired and ended up becoming a criminal law attorney. So your reputation, if you turn down assignments and so forth, could destroy your career. You need to be very careful. If you think you're asked to do work beneath your current level, it doesn't matter. You're there, you're being paid. The law firm needs a certain type of work done. And why would you destroy your career by not doing work that the firm is asking you to do? That's crazy. But people do that, but you can certainly move firms where you get more sophisticated work. And when you do move firms, you can say, I want to work on bigger matters, or I want to get more responsibility. And the firms that are going to hire you like that. But you have to be very careful about turning down assignments. And I hope, that I've given you good enough advice about that, because that's very dangerous. And I've seen so many people destroy their careers by doing that. And maybe not destroying their careers, but getting into a lot of trouble professionally. Okay, let's see if I can do it this way. I've been with the same firm for nearly a decade, and while it's stable, I feel like I've hit a ceiling. The idea of making a lateral move or changing practice areas is daunting. What are the most important factors to evaluate in deciding whether to stay in a familiar or limited environment is actually costing you more than taking a risk? Okay, so a couple of things. The first thing is, if you've been doing a practice area for 10 years, you certainly can do it, but it's going to be incredibly difficult to switch practice areas because you've been trained in a practice area for 10 years. Why would a law firm hire someone with 10 years of experience that wants to change practice areas? Certainly a law firm's not going to be interested in that. Maybe you can join a law firm where you can do more than one practice area, but that is pretty dangerous to think about changing practice areas at that point in time. Making a lateral move when you're 10 years out, that means you're in an environment where you're currently valued. If you've been at the same firm for 10 years, where you have employment stability. So you can certainly improve your situation there by learning how to bring in business. If you make a lateral move, you don't know what that firm's going to be like. People make lateral moves all the time, and they go into firms where they think they're going to make more money, whatever, and the firm may not be as stable, or the job may not be as stable as the one that they have. So you need to be very careful about that. If you're interviewing with firms, do you feel comfortable at that firm? Do you think that there's really upward potential? And what's going to be different about it? Is it going to give you more sophisticated work? Are you going to be more able to develop business? What is that firm going to do for you that you're not getting at your current firm? And sometimes you're better off staying where you're at. One thing I do recommend for everyone, I don't know why people don't do this, but you should always be aware of the jobs that are in the market. You should always be looking at LinkedIn, Indeed, and Law Crossing, and so forth, to see what jobs are out there that you potentially could do. Are those jobs better? Do they have higher salaries? Are they going to give you more sophisticated work? And there's nothing wrong with applying to several jobs per week with firms that may have a better platform for you, and then interviewing with them and seeing if those are a better fit for you, or you feel like you can do more and go farther, or the attorneys are better. That's something everyone should be doing. You should always be aware of the market because like you're a product. And so as a product, you need to be aware of, are there situations where you're going to potentially do better? Partners do that. Partners are always networking, and even the one most successful and trying to learn, is there a better environment for my clients? Is there a better environment, that may offer lower hourly rates? Is there a better environment that will give me more money for the work that I do? Partners do that. If I call up a partner in any major law firm, they may say, I'm happy where I'm at, but a lot of them will say, keep me in mind for opportunities. They're always networking, the most successful partners. Then they all are. And you should be joining groups and things where you may be exposed to people that are doing better work. And so being in a limited environment cannot cost you, can help you. I know a guy that became a partner at Quinn Emanuel, and he was at a small firm, and he went and was just like, okay, I'm going to make the best of it that I can. And they didn't have very sophisticated work, but he had a trial against another partner. He was doing the trial. It was a small firm that wasn't paying a lot. And he had a trial against another partner from that firm. And he did such a good job that the guy was like, we could use someone like you at this firm. And he hired him. So the guy just put his head down and had done the best work he could, and ended up taking him to a firm where he did exceptionally well and was able to become a partner there just by excelling where he was at and being seen by people that were very successful there. I know another guy, and actually it's an interesting story. Like, this guy made an early career mistake. So he was a summer associate at a major U.S. law firm, and the law firm basically they told people that were supposed to start as first year associates that they wouldn't be able to start for at least 6 months. And they said, because they didn't have the work. So they told people that, right, there were summer associates that were coming out of law school that we don't have work for you for the next 6 months. So they sent a letter to all these people that have been summer associates in this major law firm. And they said, we're not going to be able to have you start for 6 months. It may be longer because there's a recession in the legal market right now. But if you want, you can take this check. I think we're talking about like in the 90s. You can take this check for $30,000 and not start with us as a associate at the end of the time when we have the work for you. And so he took the $30,000, and the only job he could get was with an insurance defense firm. And it took him over 10 years to move up and eventually get this job at Quinn Emanuel, which I thought was very interesting. You have to make career decisions that are going to benefit you, and try to stay with the most successful attorneys you possibly can. Okay, next question. Oops. Yeah, I'm a lawyer who is licensed in New York City. I spent all my career in the Middle East, and I'm having a hard time getting clients a job. I'm so motivated by your talk. I'd love to hear what you do if you're in my shoes. What 3 steps can I take to shake things up? Okay, so the first thing is, you're not going to get a job in a big law firm if all of your experience has been in the Middle East. That's a very common thing. People will go overseas when they get out of law school or whatever, and then they'll want to come back, and law firms are not going to be as welcoming. What do? You start at the bottom. You get the best job. You get the best job you can. So you get the best job you can. Oftentimes, you're not going to get interviews for jobs because people aren't going to think that your experience will translate into the kind of work they do. So you get the best job you can, but you also need to look deeply into you need to think very deeply, about how you need to go. Like, when you look at the legal market, you need to try to look at things in a lot of depth. You can't just apply to jobs. You need to apply to firms that potentially could have work for you. What do? I don't know what your practice area is, but you could say you're in, I don't know, Albany, New York. You could say corporate attorney firms or corporate law firms in Albany, New York. Albany. And so you'll get these results that are showing you all the law firms there that do that kind of work. And a lot of these are going to be very small. So you're going to see like more results. You're going to go in here And you're going to see like a lot of very small places that may do this, like the law offices of Gregory Murray. So Gregory Murray is probably not getting a lot of people that are applying to work for him in Albany, New York, because it's just one guy. So why would you not, or actually it's a woman, applying to her could be a very smart thing because she's not getting a lot of people. Now, this woman is not in that practice area of corporate, so there's something wrong with the search, but you would try to find people that are solo practitioners or that do the kind of work you want to do. And then incredibly, if you are looking at, if you're looking at, say you're in New York, you would just say list of cities in New York. And there's just so many places that you could potentially apply to. You have all of these cities and municipalities in New York. You could apply to places in all of these different cities if you wanted to. If you were geographically flexible, you could apply to places in White Plains and track down attorneys in Valley Stream. And this is what most people don't do. They think, oh, there's not enough places to apply in Buffalo, but there really are. There will be a substantial number of solo practitioners and small law firms in a city of 278,000 people that do that kind of work. That do corporate work, and you can apply to them. And I'm just telling you, like right off the bat, that there are probably 10,000 in New York State solo practitioners and small law firms that do this kind of work. But if you're able to dive deeply into things, you're more likely to get jobs, find places. You go Troy, New York, and just back to Google. I'm just showing you here, corporate attorneys, corporate law firms in what was that? Utica, New York. Do that. So you can always track down places to work for. You can always try to find a person under real estate. So I guess you're a real estate attorney, you can find solo practitioners in all these places that would hire you. But most people don't do that. Most people only look at jobs and they wonder, why am I not getting jobs? What am I doing wrong? You have to apply, you have to apply to firms that don't have openings, and you have to apply to a lot of them. You can't just expect to compete with people that are currently in whatever. You live in New York City, you can't compete with with the jobs. If you try to get jobs in New York City, unless you're applying to someone, you can do what's called a social search, which means find other attorneys in New York that have worked in New York City, that have worked in the Middle East. So that's what I would do too. At least, I would do that, but they may hire you. But I would apply to firms that don't have openings in New York City, try to concentrate on small law firms, solos, preferably in your practice area. And then I would also do a social search, meaning find attorneys that have worked in the Middle East and apply to them. And I guess you asked for three things. I would apply to every job. We get people contacting us at BCG every day, and they've had openings sitting around on LinkedIn and Indeed, they're not getting any application. Why is that? They may have the salary and the job is low. They just may not be getting applicants. So you need to go out and try to find the best places that will hire you. Anyone can get a job. It doesn't matter what you do. You need to be able to do that. Okay, so someone here says, I'm currently looking for a new job and I landed an interview for tomorrow. How can I best prepare for the interview? Let me see if I can give you some advice. Okay, so if you search on BCG or just search for this thing that says top 22 interview tips, Harrison Barnes, this particular search, you'll find a good article I wrote. You may even find a book. I would look into that. I have a lot of material on BCG that talks about it, but law firms, when they're interviewing you, they're only asking these questions. So I'll just give everyone long-term. So these are the only 5 questions that a law firm is asking when they're hiring you. They're asking these 5 questions. These 5 questions, really, when any law firm, by the way, that interviews you, they actually want to hire you. They want to hire you. They are interviewing you and they're hoping that you don't make mistakes that are going to disqualify you from that job. The law firms want to hire you. So what does can you do the job mean? It means they're interviewing you. Your resume looks like you can do the work. That's not really a concern. They're not really too concerned about that. So going in and talking about all your experience and so forth, they may ask you some questions, technical questions and things, but really that's the main question that they're asking. Then they're asking, are you going to commit to the job? Meaning, are you going to be able to stay there? Are you going to stay at that job for a long time? Are you going to commit? And so they want to know that. If they think you're going to commit, then they're more likely that's what they want. They don't want to think that you're going to just stay there for a short time and leave. So you have to go into an interview and say, this is the kind of place I would like to stay for the rest of my career. This is exactly the type of work I want. I'm very excited about this. And then so they want to think that you'll stay because law firms don't like hiring people but aren't going to stay. So if you have a bunch of moves on your resume and so forth, that's going to concern them. And they're not going to like that. The next one they're asking is, can you be managed? And that means, will you follow orders? Will you be like on their side? Do you look like someone that's going to be trouble? Or do you look like someone that will do whatever they want? You need to tell them, hey, I'm a team player. I'll take whatever assignments you want. We talked about people turning down assignments earlier. That's a sign of someone that can't be managed. And they want to hire someone that really wants the job. People like to hire people that are enthusiastic about the job. And so you have to act like that. And then if you do all these things, like you're going to be likable. And so the law firm needs to like you. And the final thing I'll tell you just in terms of questions. So questions you ask would be things like, what would make me be your best associate or whatever, best associate or the best hire you've ever had. What would I need to do? What would I need to do? What would I need to do in the first 90 days? Something like that. The first 90 days. Something like a question like that will help you tremendously if you ask questions like that. So those are the big things about interviewing that I would recommend. Next question. Do you know law firms that are for sale? Yeah, there's firms all over the country that need people small firms, solo practitioners that need people to take them over. Sometimes we'll get a call from like a law firm or someone practicing law in a small town, and it might be like some desert town in California, and they'll say, hey, I'm getting ready to retire. I need someone that can come in and take over my practice. It happens not frequently, but it happens from time to time. So I don't know of any law firms that are for sale, but a lot of times if you go to work for an older attorney in a certain practice area, then they often will turn over their practices to you. I've seen that happen with, for example, trust and estates attorneys. Like for whatever reason right now, there's a lot of trust and estates attorneys that are getting old and they need someone to come in and take over their practice. So anytime you go to work for someone that's likely to retire soon, they will often turn over their practice to you. Next question, let's see here. How do you know that the success of a person comes largely from his hard work versus being handed down to him or her, he, she, and has a unique advantage that others cannot acquire, such as family connection or race? Okay, yeah, certainly people are handed down and do have a unique advantage from family connections or race. There are some firms where they're family law firms and there might be a son that's an associate or something along those lines. But in reality, most of these people's advantage, that's not that often. Sometimes, yes, race, all these sorts of things, race, political affiliation, religion, religious affiliation, what else? Schools, type of person, cultural, I would sexual orientation, type of person. All of these things can influence how much you succeed in a given law firm. There are law firms that may be composed of all people of one race, and sometimes different races have different outlooks on the world, and the people of that race will connect with each other. So that can affect things. Sometimes a law firm might be all Democrats or Republicans. So those people will all share that in common, and that can affect what happens to you. Sometimes law firms may be composed of all Muslims mostly, or all Mormons or whatever, and that can affect how well you do. Sometimes people will all gone to the same schools. Sometimes law firms will have a lot of people of one sexual orientation, not another, be more welcoming to them. And so the type of people you surround yourself with will often determine how successful you are. And these aren't things that maybe you can call them discriminatory, that people feel comfortable around people that are like them. That's one reason why it can be difficult for people of certain races to advance, because they're just not connecting with others that are like that. It can be difficult if you're from another country to connect with people, and you'll have advantages based on the country from. I was working with a woman not too long ago, and she was hired by a firm in South Carolina, and she was from, I don't know, New York or something. And she went there and discovered that all of the people had gone to the same high schools and so forth in that area. And she didn't fit in, and it was difficult for her to work with them and get business. There's a lot of studies of when, for example, and I'm not again trying to be racist here or anything, but when Black attorneys, like sometimes in firms, like they join them, and then they don't, for whatever, because of different things, they may not get the same sort of mentors, which is unfortunate, or they may not be part of different groups, which is unfortunate. And I don't think that occurs as much anymore, but 20, 30 years ago, that was a big deal. And it still is a big deal to some extent, because that can sometimes hold people back. It can hold you back if you're a certain sexual orientation. No one like that is in your firm, or all these sorts of things can sometimes hold you back. So you need to find environments where you're comfortable with the people. Everything in the U.S. is ostensibly about merit. You need to try to get as much merit as you possibly can. I mean, you're doing the best work and making all these things, regardless of what they are, ignored. So if you're the best Democrat, for a Democrat in a firm of all Republicans, you're doing the absolute best work, then you'll probably advance. But all these things about if people are a certain way, you need to often join a firm where you're comfortable with the people and where the people are like you. Because if you're around people who like you, they're sharing information, you're part of groups and so forth. I was doing a study about, and I wrote a book about diversity in law firms. And I was talking to an attorney in, I don't know where it was Alabama or something like that. And he said that they wanted to hire attorneys of a certain race because a lot of their clients were of that race. And so they would try to hire these attorneys of a certain race, and then they would hire them, but they would all live on a different part of the city. And the part of the city they lived in was that people had different sports teams and things, and different groups that they were part of. And so all these people that were partners and associates in this law firm, their children were going to the same schools, and they were in the same little leagues and all this sort of stuff. And then they associated those sorts of games and stuff. And he said that because of that, it ended up that people of the certain race never felt comfortable, never were able to network and so forth, and that held them back. So you have to try to be around people that are like you, or where, regardless of how a person you are, like you can advance, and you can advance on your merit instead of these other things. And so that's a very good question. Okay, let me see here. My current firm is against certain types of marketing, regardless of ROI. They feel it is beneath the firm. Any suggestions? Yeah, join a firm where your marketing is welcome. So that's it, welcome, or do different types of marketing. So sometimes different types of marketing, the kind of marketing they like. So that just means if you join a firm that's against a certain type of marketing, you just need to do the kind of marketing they want. Maybe they want to attract a certain type of client, not another type of client. So you just need to do what's appropriate at that firm. There's some firms where they'll only take a client unless they're like a major US company. And so you can't stay at a firm like that. I know a guy that he was at Gibson Dunn in Los Angeles. And that firm basically said to him, if you want to bring in clients, you need to be these giant corporations and so forth. And he was like, you know what? I'm not going to spend 10 years at this firm and trying to bring in these clients because it's going to be impossible for me. And he actually ended up starting a very successful, extremely successful personal injury firm. You just need to do the type of work and marketing stuff that's important for that firm. Okay, next question. I have an LLM and IP law, but I do not have a science background. This has been an obstacle for me to have a job. What advice do you have for me? Yeah, so a lot of people go and they get these LLMs and IP, but law firms want people with science and math background. What can you do? Sometimes people will go and they'll take classes in college in electrical engineering, like they'll take a couple of years of classes and then they'll try to apply and then they'll have a degree even while they're attorney, or they will get a master's degree in some sort of science thing, but you need that in order to take the patent bar. So I don't like it when people go get LLMs and IP law because it's really about having the science and technical background. I don't like it that schools even offer that. I think it's kind of a waste of people's money unless you have a science background or math background or biology background or whatever it is. My advice for your LLM and IP law degree, you can do trademark work, and you can be admitted, I don't think you can be in the patent and trademark office without, I don't know exactly how it works, I'm sorry. But I think you can do trademark work without being admitted at the patent bar. And you could do that, and that's relatively easy to learn. And you could start your own practice doing that, or you could go get a degree in some science discipline and take the patent bar, which is necessary to write patents. But typically people that are patent attorneys, they naturally gravitate towards science and math and biology and things. So if you don't naturally gravitate towards that, and that's not what you're interested in, then you shouldn't be trying to be an IP attorney. There's no benefit. Why would you compete with people that have natural gifts in math and science as opposed to not doing that? It just doesn't make a lot of sense unless you want to be a trademark attorney. What else could you do if you have that degree? You can still do other practice areas like commercial litigation and other things, but having that degree in IP law is not going to help you. I remember early in my career, there was a woman that moved to Los Angeles. She got a degree in IP law somewhere in Massachusetts or something, and wanted me to help her get a job. And there wasn't really anything I could do because of that fact. I felt badly about it. But having the degree in IP law is not necessarily going to help you. I would caution everyone about getting these LLMs. People become interested in IP, but it may not be their skill set, or they get LLMs and different things, and it may not be their skill set. Typically, when a law firm's reviewing you to hire you, they're going to hire you based on your expertise in something, so what do you get an LLM in? I was early in my career, there was some sort of school in Florida that offered an LLM in education law. And people were getting hired like crazy out of that because there was a lot of demand for education law attorneys. There's all sorts of LLMs. You can get an LLM in tax, but then is that going to help you get a tax law job? Because that's a very competitive field. So if you get an LLM, you need to understand like how it's going to help you. And it can help you, but you just need to be very careful. Okay. Thank you, by the way, for all these great questions. These are really good questions today, and I appreciate it. Okay. If I'm at a firm where partners heavily control marketing exposure of potential commercial litigation clients, cold calling and tapping into my personal work are some strategies I can use to originate work in this environment. What other sorts of strategies might work? So the question about cold calling, I'll just tell you about that. So cold calling means you find companies and things that are sued and you call them up and tell them you'd like to help them, or you can meet with them to talk about the case and that sort of thing. This is what people do to get business. And so cold calling people that are sued and stuff can be very helpful. Tapping into your personal network is also very helpful. Staying in touch with people that you may know personally can help you get business. I know one attorney that developed like a $1.5 million book of business by surfing in El Salvador with people, which is a crazy thing. You would think, how can you get business surfing in El Salvador? But he was able to network with a couple of people there that had work, and he brought it in, and that helped him. I know one guy that and I'm working with right now. He graduated from law school. He worked for the government doing something for a year or two, and then he went to work for 1 year at a small law firm. But I don't know what it was, but he started networking with all these people and developed like this large book of business that his firm couldn't even handle. So he started giving it to other firms, and he did it all through his personal network and just people that knew him. So people develop business many times by just being in environments where people will have work for them. They can get work that way. So that's a great question. Okay, next question. If someone starts work and starts their legal career in a non-elite setting, is there still a path to reach those more prestigious environments, like a top firm, or even pivot into an in-house or public sector role with elite peers? Yes. So if you start your career in a non-elite setting, you can definitely get into a more prestigious environment like a top firm. You can pivot to in-house or public sector firm with elite peers. How do you pivot and get into a more prestigious league environment? You just get the best experience you possibly can where you're at. Then you keep trying to interview with better and better firms, and you do whatever you can to get into better firms. And then when you get to one better firm, you get experience there and move to another. And you just become like the best person you possibly can. And you learn how to do really well where you're at. And you learn how to take that experience and move into a better firm. People do this all the time. It's a very smart thing. I recommend for everyone, if you can, staying in law firms for your career. If you go in house, that can be a very risky proposition. It can hurt you because if you go in house, like companies go out of business all the time. They have new legal departments and things that come in. They lose business and then their work, and then they lay people off. In-house can be very dangerous for people. And if you're an in-house attorney, you can't practice like into your 60s and 70s. You typically will have to retire at a certain age. So if you're in a law firm, you can, or you have your own firm, you're going to have all these clients and you're always going to have work. So I think if you learn how to do that, so staying in a law firm, I think is honestly like the most important thing you can do. If you want to pivot in-house, you can do that. You can apply to in-house jobs. You can network with companies and things and try to get jobs there. People do that all the time. You can go on to Law Crossing, for example, and we monitor all of the companies we can for jobs there, and you can apply to jobs there. You can go into a public sector role. Every city in the country has different types of attorneys in it. Some of them it's only prosecutors, some and DA and defense attorneys that they hire. I mean, you can do all those sorts of things with top people, but generally you just want to go, you join groups and things, and you try to work in absolutely the best environments you can. And I recommend staying in a law firm. Next question is, I've always felt drawn to the business side of law, but I haven't found the right environment to explore within my current firm. Are there specific signals or questions I should be looking for when vetting potential law firms during a job search that indicate they generally encourage and support entrepreneurial thinking? Yes, that's a very good question. There are firms that will encourage you to get business. There are firms that will teach you how to get business. And they will often tell you that during the interview. They will say those sorts of things. You'll learn about what the law firms, when you talk to associates, you can say, you'll always interview with them during interviews. You'll say, was any other associates bringing in business? What's it like? When they'll say, no, it's just work and things. You can always try to pull that information out during interviews. You can ask, how important is business to this job? Frankly, most law firms, when they hire you for an associate role, are just interested in you doing the work. They often do not want you bringing in business because they need work done and they want people that are going to commit and do work for them. So if you try to work for a firm like that, it will often, if you try to work for a firm that just wants you to do work, that will often limit you. What you can do if you are at a firm that just wants you to do work is you can bill what they require, and then you can spend your free time developing business. I know one guy that developed a $30 million plus book of business, and he was at a firm and he billed 2,000 hours a year. Then he told himself that the only way he was going to get ahead in the profession was if he tried to develop business. And he spent another 2,000 hours a year prospecting for business. So that's something that you should do. You should always be trying to do different things. Law firms aren't going to tell you you're bad for spending 2,000 hours a year looking for business if you're billing 2,000 hours a year looking for business. And that sounds crazy, but what if you just did 500 hours? You could do that too. So you need to make that a priority in your career. Okay, next question. I'm a junior associate at a big law firm and the client contact is minimal at my level. How do I start planting the seeds now to eventually develop a book of business, especially if I'm considering lateral moves in the next few years? Okay, to develop a book of business, you need to get out and you need to try to network with people. You need to have people that you spend time with outside of practicing law that potentially could give you business. You need to do things like beef up your resume with articles and presentations and so forth. And that can help you develop a book of business. You need to learn what other people are doing. You need to read books about how to develop business. You do all the sorts of stuff. And if you do the sorts of stuff, it can help you eventually develop a book of business. It's a very good question, but you just If you're at a big law firm, you're probably never going to have the opportunity really there to book build business. So you need to figure out, how do you put yourself in a position to do that? Big law firms have partners with a lot of work. They don't want to necessarily have you out developing business. It's not in their best interest. They figure that the clients you're going to bring in are going to not be large enough. And so they're not going to be excited about it most of the time. So you have to do what you can to plant seeds with other people and maybe go to smaller law firms. Attorneys move, by the way, partners and associates. They move firms all the time because the billing rates are too high or the type of clients the firm wants them to bring are too large. And so they move law firms in order to get the ability to bring in business. And I have a couple statements I'd like to make about big law firms. So if you work at a big law firm, you should try to work there for at least 5 years to learn a practice area, to work with people that are practicing law at a very high level, have very good habits and things and ways of doing the work. You should always try to get as much exposure as you can. You can work there 5 years, you can work there 6 or 7 years, but eventually you're going to probably need to move because that's just what happens in big law firms unless you have a lot of business. So when you do move, you want to put yourself in a position where you're going to be able to develop a book of business. And you move to a smaller law firm where you figure out some sort of niche in your practice, or I don't know what it would be, but it could be doing software services contracts, something that distinguish you, that make you look unique to clients. And so what about your practice makes you look unique? What kind of experience do you have, like in one maybe niche of your practice area that's going to enable you to develop business regardless of the size firm you're at? Because it's often not enough just to say, I'm a corporate generalist. What if you're a corporate attorney that understands mergers and acquisitions really well? And then you can take that experience and help smaller companies do it for less money. There's all sorts of things you can do. If you move laterally, you should try to move to a firm where you feel like you can bring in clients that's entrepreneurial enough. And then if you move to another large law firm, then you're going to be in the same situation. I see people all the time. It's very sad, but I see people all the time that have worked in major law firms and now are unemployed. And so what you're doing a lot of times when you work in a major law firm is you're front loading when you're getting experience, which is really good. But after a certain point in time, you're front loading and getting high compensation earlier in your career and trading that off, potentially having business and developing your own practice and learning how to do that earlier in your career. Because big law firms don't have any incentive to do that. They sometimes will take different matters if you bring them in, but they have very high billing rates. And so it's often hard to bring in clients. People do it. So people do it all the time. I saw a woman in Chicago, and this is, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. She became an equity partner at Mayer Brown. She was like an 8th-year associate, and through some contact, she brought in some big Chicago company. I think it was Sears. I mean, Sears doesn't exist anymore, but at one time it was a giant company in Chicago. Brought in that client, became a partner. She just happened to network with the right people. It's possible, but it's very hard. And unless you're able to bring in huge clients, it's hard. What kind of big client is going to give a major matter to an associate? You typically would want to be a partner. Now, what I can say about big law firms is there's a lot of big law firms that if you commit, if you build the hours, and you do really well. I mean, some of those law firms are like Kirkland and Ellis. Like they will make you a partner, like not an equity partner, but they will make you a partner if you do really good work for them for several years. And then you can take that credential and go out into the market and start meeting people and doing what you want. One analogy I like to give for bringing in clients is if you want to find someone to date or a life partner, or husband or wife, whatever, you figure out how to get it done. You don't, it happens, you just figure it out. So it's the same thing with bringing in business. You need to figure it out. How are partners bringing in business? You ask them, how did you get this client? You ask them all these different sorts of things, and then you learn from what they're doing and try to do the same. So good question. Okay. I understand the importance of building a niche and becoming known for something specific in order to grow a substantial book of business. But I'm currently in a generalist role at a mid-sized law firm that doesn't offer much flexibility. How can I realistically begin to reposition myself towards a more specialized practice area without jeopardizing my current position or alienating colleagues who rely on me for a variety of matters? Okay, all right. Okay, so you can still develop a niche when you're in a generalist role. You can try to do more work in one practice area than another. So I take people all the time and they have multiple resumes. So I'm working with a woman right now who worked for several years as a commercial litigator. Then she went and worked in another law firm and she did something called the Fair Credit Reporting Act. So the Fair Credit Reporting Act is a very specialized niche. It was only half of her practice. So what I told her to do was to write a resume that only talks about the Fair Credit Reporting Act and doing that for her last position, and then beef that up and put a lot of material on there about it. And then her jobs as commercial litigators, I told her if she did any Fair Credit Reporting Act, even just a little on that, just list that and take off everything that suggests she's something else. So she might have been members of associations and stuff like that. So instead of making her resume look like she's a generalist, she looks like a specialist. So it's very common with corporate attorneys. They might be doing M&A, corporate journalist work, and maybe some other aspect of corporate law, but they are able to take their resume and position themselves to look like an M&A attorney as opposed to just a generalist, and then take off all the other stuff that has nothing to do with anything. And that can help them tremendously in terms of how they are able to look to law firms as specialists in one thing. So if you're a generalist, you have a resume that emphasizes one practice area. And most mid-sized firms will be generalists. So how does that work? So in smaller markets, typically there's not as bigger companies. And so those companies will give work to these smaller firms and even mid-sized firms. And the attorneys, because they're not getting enough specialist work in a practice area, will do everything. That's actually okay, but you're always going to be better in terms of bringing in clients sometimes if you're a specialist. You can certainly be a generalist to bring in clients, and that can be useful in smaller to mid-sized markets or firms. But generally, you're going to be able to get more clients and things if you have some sort of specialist work. I knew a guy that became a partner at a major US law firm, and he was working for another partner that did nothing but mergers and acquisitions for pharmaceutical companies and had a very strong niche doing that. And that's an example. There's all sorts of ways that you can develop a really good niche that can be helpful for you. Let me just see here. Someone asked again, follow up on firms for sale. Do you know specific sites that advertise such firms? No, I don't. Maybe I do. Let me just show you this. That's a good question. That's funny. Let me just see if it is. Oh, this is fun. So watch this. Someone just mentioned Biz Buy Sell. Give me 1 second. Okay, so there's a website called, not now. There's this site, Biz Buy Sell, and it's like legal services and law firms for sale in California. Browse 13 legal services and law firms for sale currently in California. So the website is Biz Buy Sell. And so you go here, let's see what they say. Legal collections, established San Diego law practice for sale for $175,000. Attorney estate planning for 33 years, profitable law practice in San Diego County, 20-year established law firm with $28 million EBITDA, meaning earnings before taxes and all that kind of stuff. Solo but stable, estate plan, workers' compensation defense, law enforcement, law firm. So what's interesting about these types of law firms that are for sale is that a lot of times what they will do is you don't have to actually pay them when you buy it. So they may have all this money that they're asking for. You don't have to pay them when you buy it. You can pay them out of the money that you generate from the work that you do there. These are just like lawyers that want to retire. So this is one way to find them. There's law firms for sale. So again, you got the same thing here, legal services and law firms for sale in California, view on LoopNet. Let's see here, 12 law firms. Yeah, same thing. I guess they're taking the same ones from that other site. But this is a way to find law firms for sale. The law practice exchange, let's see, the marketplace, seeking to acquire, these are virtual license contact for price. So yeah, the law practice exchange. So yeah, there are sites out there. That's a very good question. Thanks for answering. I think that helped a lot of people where you can find different law firms and so forth for sale. Great question. So yes, you can find law firms that are for sale and you can find them on those sites. And there's obviously, let me just make sure I put the wrong one in. That's a good question. And yes, you can find them. And not only can you find them, but you don't need to come up with all the money. many times they'll let you pay them out of the work that you're doing for them. I mean, the work that you're doing on the client. So say the law firm's for sale for $1 million and it generates $500,000 a year, then you can potentially pay it off out of the money that the law firm earns. Okay, I'm new to the profession. I joined with the goal of being a TV lawyer. What is the best area to practice for this? I noticed that most of the TV lawyers are criminal lawyers. Yes, most of the TV lawyers are criminal lawyers. So yes, that's a good practice area to do it because they want people to comment about criminal trials and all sorts of things. And then if you become well known for that, that can help you do very well as an attorney. Okay, let's see. Next question. And I'm glad I was able to answer that question about finding law firms for sale because, and there'll be other sites as well as the one I showed you at that. But again, anyone can buy a law firm. So why not? I'm a 60-year-old non-equity partner in a small specialized firm. The firm refuses to make me equity partner and isn't paying up to my expectations, despite the fact that I bill more hours and generate somewhat more business than the equity partners. What would you do if you were me? I would leave. So this is a very common thing that happens. I'm working with a trust and estates woman in New York right now that is in your exact same situation. And she allowed me to market her to a lot of firms, and she's already got 5 interviews, and she's probably in her mid-60s. And so you need to find law firms that are specialized in your practice area and basically send the person that's in charge of your practice area your resume, tell them that you'd be interested in talking about. You do not want to be stuck in a firm that's not paying you as much as you're capable of making. So you need to find an environment that's going to pay more. And there are environments that will pay more, that will make you an equity partner, but you need to apply to a lot of places. It's again, the search that I did where you search for all the law firms in your practice area that do a certain type of work. And it's very interesting. So I'm going to show you another search you can do that's very interesting. And I'll just, hopefully my computer won't crash. For some reason, my Google keeps crashing. So give me 1 second. I'm going to show you another search that actually works really well. So you go to x.com, and this is fun, showing people these types of searches. So you go to x.com, then you go to, I don't know, is Grok on here? What's Grok? X.com. Sorry, you go to Grok, and then, which is Elon Musk thing, which is really cool. And then you would search for, let's just say your practice area. I'm just trying to come up with a practice area. What are some, can you name 25 law firms, 25 boutique law firms in the Chicago region, Chicago and the suburbs? I just did a search for 25 boutique law firms in Chicago that practice primarily corporate law. And so it's going to do this research. I don't know why this is happening. Oh, verify. I guess it's making me log in. There's now doing the search based on available information. So it was able to immediately identify 25 boutique law firms in Chicago that do the type of work. So some of these are firms you've heard of, but a lot of them I haven't even heard of, like Still a Business Law, Goldstein and McClintock. So what is Still a Business Law? Let's see what that is. So Still a Business Law, that's just a little law firm that I found. I've actually never heard of them. That's about, who's it about? Meet Your Legal Counsel, Stilla. So you can find all these types of small law firms, and just this is just in Chicago. You can do that search anywhere and find little places you can apply to. And this is Chicago Business Lawyers, and it's a small law firm, 3 people. Or you just look around and you poke around and try to find places you can apply to, and then you just send them your resume, see what happens. And that's a really good way to find jobs. And I don't know if you want to work in a one-person law firm, but certainly some of those that I mentioned, you could expand the search and say, can you send me 50 of them? And then you would apply to those. And then you can search on Google. So it's never difficult to find those types of firms. But I would use Grok. You can use ChatGPT. You can use all of these different ways to further your career. Okay, this is the next question. This is the last question. So if anybody has any additional questions, I would ask them right now. Further than my earlier question, I studied law in England and I do not have a JD. I'm going to do a JD because there are too many LLMs, and I've heard the market is saturated with foreign educated LLMs. Do you know similar people with foreign educations who revamp their careers by retraining America by doing a JD? Yes. If you want to get a job in the United States, you certainly could apply to a lot of small firms with your LLM and see what happens. But An LLM is good for being able to get a law degree in New York or wherever, or California. But in general, you need to have a JD. Law firms want to hire JDs because JDs, when you go to a JD program, you're going to a certain school that has a certain reputation, and then you're competing with US attorneys to get certain types of grades. And if you have really good grades, when you get a JD, you're much more positioned to get a job, and you have to get a JD. I've seen people do this all the time. It's very funny. I was working with an attorney not too long ago, and he was in North Dakota, like in a small law firm. He came from China, and he went and got a law degree from the University of North Dakota. And then he was at this law firm doing like agreements, selling tractors and farming equipment and stuff, which I thought was really funny. He got a job. The point is, yes, you get, and so if you get a JD from a very good law school in the United States and you get into one of those law schools, then you can get good jobs. If you get into any law school and you get all A's and do really well, the best law school you can get into your first year, then you can transfer to a top US law school. So yes, you need to get a JD. And the JD shows that you were able to take the LSAT and good scores by the better school you get into, and you probably had good grades wherever you're at. And when you get the JD, it shows you're able to compete with people that are trying to be attorneys in the United States and to put you in a certain league with your grades and everything like that, and the quality of law school you go to. But yes, getting the JD is crucial. All right, thanks everyone for this. Oh, wait, could you offer some tips on the best practices to work with BCG attorney search? Yeah, so working with BCG attorney search is not really that hard. All you need to do to get is you need to preferably you need to practice in one practice area. That's it. So practice area and one practice area only. Practice area only. So those are the people, and it doesn't matter. This is a suggestion for getting a job with any law firm. You need to practice hopefully in one practice area and one practice area only, because the only people that we're able to place are people that are specialists in something. You have to, law firms, when they have job openings, if you go to any job site, the majority of those job openings are going to be with law firms seeking someone in just one practice area. They're not going to be seeking people in multiple practice areas. It's going to be an ad for someone to do workers' comp work, or someone to do insurance defense, whatever the ad is, or whatever people, that's what people want to hire. If they want to hire a plaintiff's employment attorney, whatever it is, you need to have experience in one practice area and one practice area only. And then, what other things are important? Consistency in that practice area. So you've been at 2 or 3 firms, that looks better than someone that's committed to a firm and been there for a while. That's what's marketable. Commitment to a practice area, longevity is often important than just that having one practice area. If you have one practice area, there's always going to be firms that are willing to hire you. And then if you do work with BCG, then you need to approve, like if we were to send you jobs, you need to approve the majority of jobs that we're sending you. And then we'll also send you firms to apply to that will apply to for you that don't have openings, and you need to approve those. And that's how you get a job working with BCG. I only work with people in one practice area. If they have one practice area, most of the time I think they look good. Other people there's some practice areas that aren't going to be marketable. If you're a DUI attorney, that's going to be really hard. Some practice areas aren't going to be marketable, but in general, most practice areas are, like immigration law is marketable, trust and estates, insurance defense, any type of practice area that's company facing that you're doing, working for companies. The biggest practice areas that are marketable are ones where you're working for companies, because with like corporate law or real estate, because those companies are more likely to have consistent work compared to firms that are working for individuals. So firms for companies typically have more money flowing into them, and because companies can afford to pay a lot of legal fees, and if there's not all that money flowing into them, then they're much less likely to hire people. They're because they're more worried about the money that's coming in. Okay, thank you everybody for being in this webinar. I hope it was inspirational. And here's one other question. I'm sorry. How can an attorney start from politics from scratch? It's interesting. So Barack Obama and Bill Clinton, when they got out of law school, Barack Obama taught as an adjunct professor at the University of Chicago Law School. constitutional law, I believe. And Bill Clinton, when he got out, taught at, I don't know, some University of Arkansas Law School. And they both got into politics. So to get into politics, you just start running for small offices, whether it's city council or whatever, and then you build up your political strength from that. And you get into politics, and you do a really good job, and you network, and you get into bigger and bigger elections and impress people in your political party, and you just keep going. And that's how it works. But if you can do it from being adjunct law professor at the University of Chicago, or being a law professor at the University of Arkansas and become president of the United States, it shows you that anyone can network into that. At the bottom of your class, like the number 0 rank, the very last person ranked at the University of Syracuse, and then Joe Biden. There's so many stories about people that did that. The Secretary for Human Services or whatever right now, Kennedy, what is, I don't remember his full name, but he's been in the news a lot for being anti-vaccine and everything, and he became the Secretary of Health and Human Services. He went to the University of Virginia Law School. Then he failed the bar exam and was fired as a district attorney in New York, and then started doing other things, and then he eventually became an environmental attorney, made all this money, and then now has that job. And I don't know exactly how he did it, but anybody can get into politics and be very successful. And once you get into it, you start figuring it out. And a lot of people are able to do that. And so it's something that you can do. Okay, last question. What is your favorite or 3 favorite self-help motivational books? The one that everyone should read, and I've talked about this before, and this sort of changed the direction of my career in life. It's Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill. That's a very good book. That is something that has changed the course of many people's lives. It talks about persistence and goals and all these things. And it's a very good book. So I like that. That's one of my favorite books. I know that Anthony Robbins once said that, he read the book and it changed his life. He knows people that read it once a year and they're successful, but the people that read it twice a year are 2 times as successful. The people that read it 3 times a year are 3 times as successful. That's a really good book. It's a classic. I don't know how old it is, but it's very old. You don't even need to buy it because it's out of the copyright or whatever's expired. So you can just download it for free online. Another one is How to Win Friends and Influence People. Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And that's another classic book. There's a course that goes along with it that you can teach, the Carnegie course or whatever Carnegie course that you can sign up for and take it virtually, or you can go in. And that's interesting. Warren Buffett behind his desk has a certificate from that class and said that taking that class was like the best investment he ever made in terms of all his investments. So that's a really good book I like. And then the final one I like, let me think about the final one I like. I'm just trying to think, because you asked for three recommendations. I like one, this book helped me too. It's called Unlimited Power, and that's by Anthony Robbins. And I think that's a very inspirational book as well. And then you can find all sorts of other books, but all those 3 books are something that I think have helped a lot of people and helped me. So I like those books. I probably should reread them. I like very good books. But Think and Grow Rich talks about persistence. It talks about goals. It talks about the people you spend your time with. It talks about all these things that are really good, and it's helped so many people become successful. How to Win and Friends Influence People. It talks about things like never criticizing people. If you criticize people, they become your enemy, and so you don't want to do that. Unlimited Power is just very motivational. It talks about how people come out of different circumstances and just become incredibly successful. Then it talks about diet, and it talks about all these different things and how his life changed. So I like those 3 books. And then there's a book by Stephen Covey that a lot of people like. He's no longer alive, but Stephen Covey book. I like his books. Then there's some books by a guy named Wayne Dyer. I think his books are really good. But a lot of these are classics or older books and things that I recommend that people read. And I think these 3 books, though, could change your life if you read them, especially Think and Grow Rich. And if you do read them again, and then just keep reading them. It can help you. Okay, thank you everyone for this webinar. I really liked the questions today. I thought they were really good. And I think I will say to everyone that being on these webinars and watching this stuff can change the direction of your life, because I watch what makes attorneys successful. I watch what makes them unsuccessful. And I think that everyone, I hope, got a lot out of this today, and just a lot of good information that I was able to share. And this, if you take what I've talked about today, it could change the direction of your career in life permanently. So thanks, everyone. And I will talk to you